Nobody tells you this part out loud. Because if they did, it would make people uncomfortable. Women after 40 aren't chasing love the way you think. They're not chasing romance. They're not chasing chemistry. They're chasing something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Here's the dark psychology most men miss. By 40, attraction stops being about excitement and starts being about hunger. Not hunger for a man, hunger for something missing. Life has already taken its toll. Disappointments stacked quietly. Dreams didn't land the way they were promised. And now, every romantic decision is driven by one silent question. What am I still lacking? She may say she wants honesty. She may say she wants connection. But beneath the words, there's a deeper need pulling the strings. And once you understand that need, her behavior suddenly makes terrifying sense. Because what she's chasing next isn't what she says she wants. And the first pattern explains why attachment can feel instant and disappear just as fast. The first pattern is the most common and the most misunderstood. This woman isn't chasing a man. She's chasing proof. Proof that she still matters. Proof that time hasn't erased her value. Proof that she's still chosen. In her younger years, attention came effortlessly. Looks opened doors. Validation was automatic. Desire showed up without being requested. Then something shifted. Compliments slowed. Competition changed. And suddenly, the mirror started arguing back. This creates an invisible panic. If her identity was built on being desired, what happens when desire is no longer guaranteed? So she starts responding intensely, not to love, but to validation. Notice this carefully. Generic compliments don't land. Beautiful feels empty, but praise that signals status, intelligence, sophistication, that hits deep, because those qualities don't expire. She bonds quickly with whoever restores that feeling. Texts feel electric. Attention feels intoxicating. Attachment forms fast. But here's the dark psychological twist. She's not attached to you. She's attached to how you make her feel about herself. And the moment that validation weakens, so does the connection, which raises a dangerous question for the man involved. What happens when she no longer needs the proof? That's where the second pattern begins. And it's far more intense. This pattern doesn't chase excitement. It chases safety. This woman has been burned. Not once, not twice. Enough times that her nervous system never fully relaxed again. A husband who left. A partner who betrayed her. Promises that collapsed without warning. So now attraction has been rewired. She doesn't fall for passion. She falls for relief. The man who feels calm, predictable, consistent. He doesn't trigger anxiety. He doesn't disappear. He doesn't threaten abandonment. And when she finds that, she attaches fast. Too fast. Because safety feels like oxygen after drowning. Here's the dark psychology most men misread. She mistakes gratitude for love. The absence of fear feels like intimacy. Stability feels like destiny. But safety is not desire. And once her nervous system settles, once the wound stops bleeding, something unsettling can happen. The intensity fades. The devotion softens. The connection feels confusing. Not because she lied, not because she manipulated, but because her attachment was driven by protection, not passion. She didn't fall in love with you. She fell in love with what you provided. And when the protection is no longer urgent, the bond can quietly loosen, which leads to the next pattern. The woman who's emotionally present, but never actually here. This woman is always waiting, not waiting for a text, not waiting for commitment, waiting for her real life to begin. She believes quietly that everything so far has been temporary, that something is coming that will finally unlock her. A man, a moment, a transformation. So every relationship becomes a placeholder. Good enough for now. Comfortable, but never the thing. She's emotionally available to possibility, which makes her emotionally unavailable to reality. Here's the dark psychology beneath it. She's not chasing love. She's chasing escape. Escape from a life that doesn't feel finished. From a version of herself that feels incomplete. That's why novelty is irresistible. Trips, spontaneity, intensity, Anything that feeds the fantasy that change is about to arrive. But fantasies don't age. Reality does. So when the newness wears off, when you become familiar instead of symbolic, the magic starts to die. Not because you failed, but because you became real. And real can't compete with a fantasy that's never been tested, which makes her exciting to attract and almost impossible to keep. And the next pattern explains why some women sabotage stability while secretly begging for it. This pattern creates the most chaos because this woman wants two opposite things at the same time. She never learned how to fully stand on her own. Her life was structured by men, a father who handled things, a boyfriend who decided, a husband who managed the hard parts of life. And now, that structure is gone. What she's chasing is another handler, someone to take control, someone to make life feel manageable again. But here's the psychological contradiction. She resents the very dynamic she needs. Control reminds her of dependence. Dependence feels humiliating, so she rebels against stability while craving it. That's why she's drawn to emotional intensity. Drama feels like freedom. Chaos feels like aliveness. The stable man feels boring. The unpredictable man feels exciting. She confuses intensity with love and peace with suffocation. Her life becomes a cycle. Responsible choices followed by impulsive destruction. Stable relationships she sabotages. Risky ones she can't resist. She's not broken. She's unfinished. An adult body carrying unresolved adolescence. And unless that contradiction is confronted, every relationship becomes another emotional crash, which brings us to a woman who seems powerful, but is secretly exhausted by her own strength. This woman looks like she has it all together. Successful, competent, respected. She spent decades mastering control, decision-making, authority, emotional restraint. These traits built her career, but they quietly sabotaged her intimacy. Because dominance doesn't switch off at night. In relationships, she manages instead of melts, leads instead of surrenders, controls instead of connects. What she's chasing is paradoxical. She wants a man strong enough to lead, but she doesn't know how to let go. So she tests, pushes, challenges, not to win, but to feel safe enough to stop fighting. Here's the dark psychology. She's armored too well. Beneath the competence is tension she can't release. A body that never rests, a mind that never yields. She craves surrender, but surrender requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. The very thing she trained herself out of. So she oscillates, attracted to strength, threatened by it. She's exhausted by her own dominance, yet terrified of losing it. If you're drawn to her, understand this. Her resistance isn't rejection. It's fear disguised as control. And what she needs most is exactly what she struggles hardest to accept, which leads to a pattern driven by loss and the hunger to reclaim what once was. This pattern is fueled by mourning. She once lived in a better world, more comfort, more status, more access. Then something broke. Divorce, financial collapse, social exile. Now her life feels smaller than it used to be. What she's chasing isn't money. It's restoration. The restaurant she used to belong in. The vacations that felt normal. The social circles that made her feel seen. She's drawn to men who symbolize that world. Success, confidence, status markers. Not because she's shallow, but because she's grieving a lost identity. Here's the dark psychological risk. She can become attached to what you represent, not who you are. Hope overrides discernment. Projection replaces connection. She wants to believe you're the bridge back, because believing feels better than accepting loss. Watch the signs. Frequent comparisons to her past. Name-dropping former circles. Standards that don't match her current reality. If your value to her is primarily access, then your bond has conditions. And conditions expire. Which brings us to a woman who never stops moving. Because stopping would force her to face herself. This woman is always in motion. New workshops, new retreats, new philosophies, new versions of herself. It looks like growth. But psychologically, it's avoidance. She's chasing identity, She believes the next insight, the next breakthrough, the next experience will finally make her feel whole. In relationships, this creates instability. Intensity feels meaningful. Conflict feels alive. Calm feels empty. She bonds quickly, burns brightly, then grows restless, not because you're lacking, but because stability threatens her search. Here's the dark psychology. Movement becomes a drug. Chaos becomes purpose. Searching replaces being. Her opinions shift constantly, each one held with total conviction, until the next arrives. This isn't curiosity, it's identity panic. With her, connection feels deep and exhausting at once. Late-night conversations, big emotional swings, endless evolution. But there's no destination, because if she ever stopped, she'd have to admit she doesn't know who she is without the search. Which leads to the most armored pattern of all, the woman who no longer believes she needs anyone. This woman prides herself on independence. She doesn't need a man. She doesn't expect anything. She's learned how to survive alone, and she truly can. But survival isn't intimacy. Disappointment hardened her. So she built armor, and over time, that armor became her identity. Here's the workaround she uses. She chooses men she can save. Younger men, struggling men, emotionally unfinished men. This keeps the power dynamic safe. She gives, they need. She stays in control. Caretaking becomes her substitute for vulnerability. She can be close, without being exposed. But there's a cost. She never gets to receive, never gets to soften, never gets to be met. Broken men feel safe because they can't threaten her fortress. Strong men feel dangerous because they remove her excuse to stay armored. If you're capable and stable, your strength isn't attractive to her. It's destabilizing because intimacy would require her to risk something, which brings us to the truth that ties every pattern together and explains why so much attachment after 40 feels intense but fragile. Here's the thread that connects everything you've heard. Lack. Every pattern is driven by something missing. Validation, safety, reality, capability, surrender, status, identity, the ability to receive. This isn't an attack on women. It's a human truth. By 40, the gaps haven't disappeared. They've hardened. What once was a tendency has become a pattern, and this is the uncomfortable insight most people avoid. Much of what gets labeled love after 40 is actually need. It feels intense, urgent, magnetic, but need-based attachment has a shelf life. When validation is restored, attraction shifts. When safety is no longer scarce, intensity fades. When fantasy meets reality, disappointment follows. That doesn't mean love is impossible. It means real love requires want, not need. Want is chosen. Need is clung to. The healthiest connections happen when two people add to each other's lives, not when one fills the other's absence. Here's the practical dark psychology takeaway. Identify the pattern. Recognize the lack. Decide honestly if you can meet it, and watch for self-awareness. The most emotionally mature women know their patterns, name their needs, take responsibility for them. Understanding what women after 40 are really chasing isn't cynical, it's clarity, and clarity is the foundation of every connection that actually lasts.